Welcome back to Bitcoin News Weekly Live. I am your host, Rob Wallace, and today we've got a doozy. Friday marked the largest liquidation event in crypto history. Over $19 billion in positions were wiped out across centralized exchanges. More than 1.6 million traders were liquidated with their accounts zeroed almost instantly. In just 1 hour, Bitcoin fell 13% from peak to trough. Altcoins, of course, suffered much worse. Atom, Cosmos, some vaporware token with a $2 billion market cap before the flash crash, briefly traded to zero before rebounding. Prices have recovered from those extreme lows, but this was historic, nearly double the size of the second largest liquidation event ever. The headlines point to Trump's 100% tariff threats against China late Friday as the catalyst. But in markets, headlines are usually used to assign blame after the fact. In reality, the amount of leverage built up in the system made a rapid collapse like this inevitable. On the day of the crash, Bitcoin futures open interest hit $100 billion. You see, ever since the meme coin craze fizzled out back in the spring, traders have been searching for their next hit. With no alt season to chase, they turn to perpetual futures with massive leverage. Perps are a zero-sum game. The losers pay the winners. When the losers run out of margin, the exchangers liquidate them to protect themselves. Under normal conditions, those liquidations are absorbed naturally by market liquidity. But when fear spikes rapidly, liquidity providers step back. That's when things unravel, and that's exactly what happened on Friday. Liquidity vanished and exchanges auto deleverage kicked in. Even profitable trades were forced out of winning positions because the platforms couldn't pay them. In total, open interest dropped $65 billion in a single day. However, there's some evidence that suggests this may have been a coordinated attack. One whale opened up 9 figures worth of shorts just minutes before the cascade began. Public data shows his final short was placed at 4:59 p.m., 1 minute before Trump's tariff tweet at 4:50. He then closed 90% of his Bitcoin short and all of his ETH short, locking in $190 to $200 million in profit in under 24 hours on Hyperliquid. That kind of timing raises serious questions about insider information. For leverage traders and long-only funds, Friday was a wipeout. But for long-term Bitcoin holders, it was just another Friday. On-chain data shows that over 60% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in more than a year. Treasury and ETF institutional wallets holding over 2 million Bitcoin didn't react at all as those markets were closed at the time. While $11 billion in Bitcoin open interest has been cleared, history shows that major leverage flushes like this, such as in 2020, 21, and 23, reset the market and paved the way for stronger rallies. In many ways, the weekend was a bull run reset, a harsh reminder for those playing with leverage, you're just renting coins. While Bitcoiners, we own private keys. Because in the long run, nothing beats Bitcoin in cold storage. Hello, everyone. Today, I am very grateful to be joined by none other than credentialed journalist Rod Palmer of the Bugle. Rod, how you doing this morning?
Doing great. Yeah, it was quite a volatile weekend, but think about this. It's October, and October is spooky season. How natural that the markets got a little bit spooked themselves. That's my analysis of it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. It is spooky season. The Bugle, I mean, you are one of the premier media outlets in Bitcoin. Before we jump into the headlines and talk about Bitcoin News Weekly, our weekly newsletter here that we discuss every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, why don't we tell the people what the Bugle is, what your mission is, and how you get the word out?
Yeah, you put it nicely. We are the premier credentialed journalist source in the Bitcoin community. Proud to report the news alongside credentialed journalists such as yourself. I'm a big fan of Frank Corvo or Bitcoin Magazine, but we are covering, I think, we try to focus on the culture, the podcasts. We're big advocates of listening to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts per week. And, starting a podcast, we think there needs to be more podcasts. We believe that is a catalyst for NGU and the rise in the price. And so we just try to push that. But at the end of the day, it's about journalism and credentials. And we strive to set the standard.
You guys are sort of like the eye of Sauron when it comes to Bitcoin culture. Nothing escapes your purview. You are on top of it all. You definitely listen to more than 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts per week. And that means that you are sort of an authority in the space when it comes to defining the culture itself. So if you could just tell the fellow plebs, if you had to give a list of the top 3 recommendations for podcasts, what are you listening to this week?
This week, definitely listening to, let's see, some of these are smaller ones that you might not have heard of before. I think you should check out. I think you need to get entropy in your podcast. I think if you listen to too much macro, you're going to be obsessed with the M2 chart, and you're going to kind of miss other things that are going on in the space. I like rock, paper, Bitcoin. I listen to the classics. What Bitcoin did. What Bitcoin did is kind of, it's kind of like watching Jimmy Fallon, right? Like, you are going to know what is at the tip of the mainstream culture, what the new stuff that's coming out, new technology, some of the best hardware wallets are going to be advertised on that first. So I love listening to that. And then I also love How Money podcast with Casey Ordinals, the creator of Ordinals, and Aaron Redwing. So it's a blend of inscription, like the Ordinals type content with Erin. She brings the astrology, which is kind of like the cousin of macro, in my opinion. And it's just it's a fresh perspective on the Bitcoin space. Again, a very culture, but also it is very technical, and they get into some really good, I love discussions of game theory, and they talk about that a lot as well.
That's a heck of a list. And yes, I love how you know the uncut gems, the hidden treasures out there in the Bitcoin podcast space. Go check those out. Hell Money, Rock, Paper, Bitcoin. There's some great ones out there that don't get the listeners that say what Bitcoin did does get, but are deserved of our time as an allotment of our 40 hours of Bitcoin podcast per week. So please go check out those podcasts. And thank you very much for tuning in to the Bitcoin News podcast live stream, what we do every week here, where we talk about the latest headlines on our newsletter, Bitcoin News Weekly. If you're watching right now, drop a like, hit that retweet button, show us some love, get some love here going for the Bugle, Rod Palmer himself, doing it live here with Bitcoin News. Love it. All right, so let's jump right in to the headlines. The title for this edition of Bitcoin News Weekly is Red October. Bitcoin holds strong through $19 billion liquidation event. Bitcoin roared back after its first 20K daily drop, while altcoins across the board saw their market cap sliced in half. So this was something to behold over on Friday. We're going to dive into it, but we've got some other things to hit on first. First, we'd like to give a big shout out to BitKey. They're the sponsors of Bitcoin News Weekly. This month, use the code Bitcoin News, get 10% off. Great hardware wallet, especially if you're just getting started. Take that leap off the exchange, get into a hardware wallet. Start with BitKey. Okay, now let's go into the adoption section. And speaking of BitKey, a sister company of BitKey is Square. So now, big news last week, Square now lets merchants automatically stack Bitcoin from their daily sales directly through their point of sale terminals. Bitcoin payment acceptance will go live for 4 million plus users on November 10th. So you guys, I'm sure you know what a Square terminal is. If you've ever gone to a barbershop or a food truck or a coffee shop, like in my neighborhood, you usually tap your card against one of these Square terminals. Well, Jack, of course, has been a long time Bitcoiner. He's run Square for over a decade now, and people have always been asking, when are you going to accept Bitcoin? Well, finally, it is happening. Cash App started selling Bitcoin in 2018, but now in 2025, Square terminals, merchants across America, across the world, are finally going to be able to accept Bitcoin. Really amazing stuff. It allows the merchants to decide how much of that Bitcoin they want to keep in straight Bitcoin. They can just see it all there on their Square terminal, or they can convert it directly into fiat, of course, because companies have fiat obligations that they must cover. So it's really very flexible, perfect for small merchants doing any kind of business. And
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm completely frozen. I'm lost you. We're kind of back. Rob is dealing with, sounds like he's dealing with some storms over there.
All right. All right. We good? You there?
Yeah, like the revolution will not have good UX. I think we lost Rob again. At least I did. I'm not talking over him. He told me that there's a storm going on. Are we there?
All right. All right.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, hello.
Hello. I can hear you. Oh, there you go. I think we're back. You got Starlink or Comcast?
Test.
You're cutting in and out. You're working like a lightning transaction. Intermittent. This is the difficulties of doing things live.
Yeah, dude. It's
Oh, I think you're back now, finally.
Are we? Yeah. Were you just holding it down for me? I really appreciate it.
I was trying. He'd cut in and out. I couldn't get into any good bits. I was going to pick up on the Square stuff, but sounds like you're back, so we can cut back into that.
Cool. All right. Yes, we're running it off of my phone. We're doing a live stream off my phone. That's pretty amazing. 2025. Okay, we heard Rod, and now Rob seems to be freezing. Rob is back. Thank you so much for holding down the stream. Let's talk about this Square thing, dude. So Jack finally answered the question, when Bitcoin, and it is starting November 10th. They are accepting. Do you think that this is a big deal for Bitcoin adoption? And do you have a Square merchant in your neighborhood that you want to orange pill?
I don't. I can't think of any Square merchants off the top of my head. I'll obviously be on the lookout for it. I think you kind of covered it. It's finally, right? We've been waiting for this Jack's been talking about it for years now. He's been getting heckled by the plebs in his mentions. They even go to and they heckle him on Nostr. So I'm glad it's finally coming. At this point, I wonder, my question would be is like, is it, I guess, better late than never? But a lot of people have already adjusted their behavior for how they spend, how they accept it. Maybe it can help with new adoption of Square terminals, but I don't know. It just seems like at the end of 2025, people have already, who are in Bitcoin, have already kind of developed their habits, their platforms around it. I'll be curious to see, one of the things they are talking about is like the ability for these merchants to set aside some of the revenue that they're taking into Bitcoin, which is cool. It's a cool feature. I'll be curious to see how many people use it.
Yeah, I think it's something that will take a long time for really catch on. But there's really no more excuses, right? I mean, for those who are adamant Bitcoiners, especially those who first get into it and want to see their whole entire environment be orange pilled before their very eyes, this is the perfect way for you to go out into your natural environment and spread the gospel, spread the good word of Bitcoin, and get some of these merchants. I mean, I've got a lunch spot that I go to that is Square. I mean, they're hippies, I think they see me wear like a Bitcoin hat and they might get turned off by it. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try, right? I'm going to try now.
Right. Do you think that these existing merchants on the platform, do they realize the flood of Bitcoiners that are about to come? Like, I hope they, I don't know how much they know about Bitcoiners, but a lot of them, at least, they like to say, like, you never spend your Bitcoin. So they're going to have a bunch of people coming to their shops, not spending any money, and just telling them, they're going to give them a list of podcasts they have to start listening to.
Yes. You're going to take my Bitcoin and you're going to listen to these podcasts. That's how it's going to go.
Which is good for them, but it's going to be an adjustment. It's a new type of patron to your coffee shop or to your burger joint.
Absolutely. But hey, I mean, this is how it spreads. This is how it works. And this is what we want, right? I mean, I think you're a proponent of using Bitcoin as money, not just as a store of value. And so, again, we need these things. And for a company that is making moves, and I think there's also been a bunch of things behind the scenes that help align this. I think Cash App and Square were sort of fighting for resources within the parent company. Now they're more aligned. So now you can buy your Bitcoin on Cash App. You can spend it at Square terminals. They have this thing called neighborhoods where you can find Square terminals within your neighborhood and get points for using it there. And it's all within one ecosystem. So it really does seem as if a flywheel of merchant adoption and Bitcoin, using Bitcoin as everyday money, could really come into effect now with this whole entire ecosystem.
Well, I hope the growth of the ecosystem and we don't have to get into the technicals, but Lightning is a difficult infrastructure, or it's just difficult to get it to work really well all the time. From if you actually are running your own Lightning node and it's self-custody Lightning, so it'll be interesting to see if the user experience gets better, or if it, drums up more of the anti-Lightning conversation, because there's a lot of people who like to be grumpy about Lightning. And, this is just more of a, kind of a exposure or a surface for criticism if it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, it's custodial Lightning, right? So you're not going to have to deal with any of the managing channels or liquidity for your Lightning channels if you use a Square terminal. But you're going to want those instant payments, right? And so if you're a merchant, you're definitely not going to wait 10 minutes to confirm a sandwich. So there's trade backs, there's a give and take and everything, right? The blockchain trilemma, as we know. So we got to deal with what we got, but I think this is a big step forward. So let's hop on over. We got plenty of headlines. We had a little technical difficulties, so we got plenty to jump into. Over here, we got Steak and Shake this weekend. Really rocking the boat. I'm sure you have a great opinion on this. So they sparked some backlash after posting an X poll about accepting ETH for payments. It was suspended within hours, with the company reaffirming its allegiance to Bitcoiners. So I don't know if the intern B got hold of the account over here, but on October 11th, on Saturday, they asked, should Steak and Shake accept ETH payments? We will abide by the results of this poll. Yeah, well, 53% said yes. I don't know if they were spinning up ETH bots or whatever, but they got a majority of the 48,000 people who voted. But then they came out and 4 hours later corrected themselves and said, poll suspended. Our allegiance is with Bitcoiners. You have spoken. Who allowed this? I'm back at my desk. So they're trying to cover their butts here. What's going on? What kind of a catastrophic PR mistake is this?
Well, first of all, they opened themselves up to the criticism of, even thinking about ETH as a payment. But then to correct the mistake, they shut down the poll, which Ethereum won, whether it was, a purchased victory or not. So now they've suspended and declined. They said they would abide by the results of the poll, but they suspended democracy. But here's the thing. It seems like an easy way to troll and get a lot of controversy drummed up and people who are mad that they would consider Ethereum. And then the Ethereum fans, whoever those people are, they came in and they bought some votes. But here's the thing. I love Steak and Shake. I'm glad that they bought that they accept Bitcoin. But, with inflation these days, it's getting to the point where you can't get a burger or you can't get something for less than $12, $15. And now you got to throw the Ethereum gas fees on that if you want to pay for it. Like, I don't think, who's going to use that, right?
Not happening. And it's funny that the King ETH himself actually came out and commented on it. He came out. Vitalik.
I didn't see that.
You did not? Listen to this. Vitalik himself came out, said, this is a good decision and I respect it to suspend the poll and be Bitcoin only. Not every business should be trying to appeal to many customers as possible in the name of not being maximalist. We need the stubborn ones who believe in their cause and their tribe and see their work as a labor of love to it. Can you believe this?
Well,
Going back to his original Bitcoin magazine days, Vitalik himself. This is some groundbreaking stuff.
If your founder, if the guy at the top of the pre-mine chain is saying it's a good thing, like, I don't think Steak and Shake should try to appeal to Ethereum users. I think it should just be Bitcoin only. That seems pretty bearish for Ethereum. I think if he really believed in it, I bet just a very strange response by you. And I'm glad that he seems to recognize Bitcoin as the best and money, the apex predator of money. But it's just, if I was an Ethereum holder, I would be very discouraged to see something like that.
Right. And I mean, he's the man himself who invented the term, a derogatory term, Bitcoin maximalist, right? He made that up in order to make us sound like cave people, right? That was his whole thing. And so now he's saying it's okay. You don't have to try to not be maximalist. You can be maximalist is what he's saying here. Very interesting development.
I'm curious what if people wanted to pay at Steak and Shake using Ethereum, but they were spending wrapped Bitcoin, WBTC. That might be a compromise.
That might be a compromise. I think you'd piss everybody off with that one. But yes, I mean, Steak and Shake, they've been a great example of corporate America Bitcoin adoption. They've seen their sales go up 10% in the quarter in which they started accepting Bitcoin. Bitcoiners were going out and spreading the gospel, as I think we'll see with these Square terminals. And they go and screw it up with one Saturday morning Twitter post. I mean, they lost some credibility here. And I think they're going to need to do some groveling to us Bitcoiners in order to get it back.
Adam Simaker will definitely be having a word with the CTO of Steak and Shake. I don't know if anybody's familiar, but when Steak and Shake opened in Missouri, Adam went and went and tried to use Bitcoin at Steak and Shake, and the proprietor was anti-Bitcoin and told him he didn't want his business. And Adam put his Karen wig on, and he got a hold of corporate. So I hope that he uses that line of communication again to make sure that they remember Bitcoin, not crypto.
There we go. Speaking of Bitcoin, not crypto, big Bitcoin development came out over the weekend. Bitcoin Core version 30 is now live, removing the 80 byte op return cap after months of debate. Critics fear spam and bloat, while supporters say it simply reflects current practices and fights minor centralization. You have played a big part in this discussion. You've sort of played the role of moderator, referee, I would say, between the two camps, calling them both out, calling out the core supporters as communists and the Knots supporters as Nazis. And so now it is live. Does this mean that the fight is over, or is this just the beginning of a greater conflagration?
Oh, certainly. People wish this conflict was over, but it is far from over. We held the funeral, the mocking funeral for Bitcoin. You were there. You were one of the people on stage, and coincidentally, like an hour after or a few hours after, we had the market crash. So it's like, oh, maybe in Bitcoin at one point was all the way down to around 100,000. I was worried that I was going to be blamed for the death of Bitcoin and that funeral. But here's the thing: everybody's talking past each other. The people who are promoting one side have their own arguments, their own logic, their own rationale, and their approach. It's a kind of like an institutional, and Bitcoin Core is an institution per se. It's a very institutional approach. The not side, their concerns and things they're worried about, they don't, in my opinion, do a very good job of communicating them. And it's a little bit vague, and they sometimes it's very technical, pedantic on one side, and a very meme heavy, broader language argument on the other side. And they end up just talking past each other, and just as much as they're pissing the rest of us off, they're really driving each other crazy. So it's going to keep continuing. I think that this is probably going to be potentially a very protracted debate for the next coming years.
Yeah, very well could be. I mean, the battle lines are certainly drawn. People have taken to their camps, and I think if anybody backed out of their camp and tried to appear neutral now, they would be martyred by both sides, right? So yes, it's very difficult, I think, to try to see past this. But I mean, Bitcoin will survive. I think at the end of the day, that is the greatest lesson, is that I think both camps understand that Bitcoin is going to survive, even if Knots is 30% of nodes, and even if Core version 30 completely gets rid of the op return limit. So we are in a position where we like to fight with each other when price goes sideways. I think that's the greatest lesson I've learned in being in this space on a daily basis for over 2 years, is that sideways means we fight each other, up means we make fun of people outside of Bitcoin, and down means we all come together, and those who really are here to build really shine. So it's just a product of where we are in the market. Chop solidation, in the words of Checkmatey. And this is the perfect fight to go along with a summer into fall of chop solidation. So we'll leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, I think it also goes to show the power of memes, that yes, your space on Friday, the funeral for Bitcoin, definitely caused the market crash as well. So we'll move on. Other headlines here. Going down into the legal section. Roger Ver, a man formerly known as Bitcoin Jesus, then became Bitcoin Cash Jesus, and got formerly an American citizen, got rid of his American citizenship, and got in some trouble in the process. So Roger Ver, he will pay $48 million to settle U.S. tax fraud charges tied to concealing Bitcoin holdings before renouncing citizenship in 2014. If he meets the terms, prosecutors will drop the case entirely. So, I mean, anybody who's been in Bitcoin, you know this face. I mean, he was one of the biggest evangelizers of Bitcoin at the beginning. But of course, as happens in many cases, you spend too long in Bitcoin, you don't get your way, you get butthurt, and you go off and fork off and do your own thing. So he renounced his citizenship in 2014. And at the time, he had, where's the number? Yeah, he had 131,000 Bitcoin is what court filings are claiming. So he had that, and that at the time was $240 million. 131,000 Bitcoin is worth a whole lot more today. So he said he was arrested in Spain last year under the Biden regime, and he's been going back and forth with the Department of Justice. And so now, even though he supposedly hid his holdings, concealed them, if he pays the piper, if he pays the tax man $48 million, he'll be able to walk away scot free. Tell me, what do you think about this, man?
Well, my first thought is, if I'm not mistaken, that's where Spain is where they got John McAfee, correct?
Yes.
And so that's right. If you are a Bitcoin whale who is not at odds with the U.S. government, U.S. citizen or not, I would avoid Spain personally. The second, they say if he pays this 48 million, he gets away scot-free. However, we just talked about how much Bitcoin he allegedly has, or probably has a lot left, and it's gone up considerably in value. So when he sells this Bitcoin to pay his his charges to settle it, that's going to create a new capital gain. He's going to have capital gain. So his tax bill is going to be huge next year. He's going to have to keep paying the government these huge amounts in taxes or settlements in perpetuity, I think. Maybe if Bitcoin has a huge crash, he could maybe do some tax loss harvesting and kind of like level things out. But it seems like a vicious cycle of just constant capital gains that he's going to owe to the United States. But it's better than being in prison.
Well, what if he got in contact with one of the great Bitcoin loan proprietors, such as Strike or Ledin, and took a loan out against his Bitcoin to pay his tax bill? Could that be the loophole that he needs to set himself free and be renounced of his citizenship and any tax burden?
Either that, or he needs to, just use Bcash, because that's going down. So he's not going to have any tax bills when he sells stuff.
There we go. There we go. Simple as. But speaking of the tax man, we've got another horror story, this time coming out of South Korea. South Korea's tax agency warns crypto holders that an unpaid tax debts could lead to home raids and cold wallet seizures, using blockchain tracking tools to trace hidden coins and confiscate hardware. So they're talking about if you've got unpaid traffic bills, traffic fines, and utility bills, they might send the tax man into your house looking for your Trezor, your cold card, your ledger, your BitKey. Oh my God, dude, that's a horror story. And I think it just goes to show you how desperate some of these governments are in the age of late game fiat.
A lot of these countries, they are kind of following in the footsteps of the United States, and they're creating their own strategic Bitcoin reserves, and they're funding it by seizing it from their citizens, seizing it from criminals. Listen, say what you want about the two Koreas, and I'm a capitalist through and through, but it is interesting that countries like South Korea are trying to seize Bitcoin from their own citizens, where North Korea is actually going and getting it from other countries. They're hacking the U.S. They're hacking hacking that exchange that had they lost billions of Ethereum and Bybit, and converting it to Bitcoin. So at least they are creating their strategic Bitcoin reserve the old-fashioned way, like plundering other countries, not their own citizens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. I never thought of it like that, but you're completely right. Would you rather have a capitalist country go out and take your Bitcoin, or an authoritative one that goes out and says, don't worry, guys, we got your back. We're going to send our agents out there to hack exchanges like Bybit for billions of dollars, to send covert workers to work remote jobs at the biggest tech companies and set in malware at exchanges and different companies to steal their Bitcoin. I mean, you can use the resources of the state to take from your citizens, or to give to your citizens by stealing from the citizens of other states. So I think it's clear which one I would want my government doing, right?
Listen, there's no perfect answers. There's only trade-offs. So you could have a country where the leadership is taken from others and plundering other countries. but there's, that's not the only thing to consider when picking a country. You can't just pick an authoritarian communist country just because they don't seize Bitcoin from your cold card. They do it from others.
They do it from others. Yeah, no, but I mean, it's crazy. They're talking about utility bills and traffic fines. Like that's enough for them to come into your house and start looking for hardware wallets. I mean, it is kind of a scary thought, right? And that just means like read these signs, see these headlines, and I mean whether it's Roger Ver renouncing his citizenship over a decade ago and still being penalized for tens of millions, almost $50 million, or South Korea going after their citizens' hardware wallets just to get money for traffic fines. I mean, you gotta get your OPSEC up, get your security situation right, because you never know whether it's a burglar or the state that has their eyes on your Bitcoin.
Yeah, before you go to all the Square terminals in your neighborhood to Orangeville, then remember that that might cost, like, people will know you're a Bitcoiner, and if you run a red light, they might come for your sats.
It's so hard though, right? I mean, it totally makes sense to me why someone in this community, such as yourself, would want to remain anon, but at the same time, we also need people to go out there and say, hey, like Bitcoin is for everyday uses, and you can be a regular person and be into Bitcoin, and you're not some shadowy super coder such as yourself who uses it. Well, one person who wants to make it more accessible. And I think at the end of the day, the best thing is if everybody uses it, then the attack surface is so wide that it becomes completely different equation here, right? And one situation that might change that is the third headline in our legal section. Senator Cynthia Lummis responds to Jack Dorsey as he calls for a de minimis tax exemption for everyday Bitcoin transactions, noting that she's already introduced legislation to make it a reality. So yeah, I mean, Jack with the Square terminals, he made his big spiel, and then at the end of it, he posted, "We need de minimis tax exemption because we can't be paying capital gains on a coffee purchase." Well, Senator Cynthia Lummis has been talking about this for over a year now, and she introduced this bill. There was talk of it being maybe included in the Genius Act, but it was left out at the last minute. And the amount of money for this de minimis exemption is changing frequently. At first, it was 600, then it was 300. So it's still a bit wishy-washy as to what the final ruling would be here. But do you think that this is actually something that would be benefiting the Bitcoin community, or it's all just lip service from the government?
Well, in an ideal world, I guess you would not have to pay taxes. If we think it's a currency, right, you don't pay taxes. When you spend a currency, if you think of it as like a digital gold, a commodity, it's really kind of how you frame the conversation. I don't want to pay taxes on or be, I don't want to end up like Roger Ver. If I thought too much coffee with Bitcoin, and that because that adds up over time. But you also have to take this into consideration, because if you get the tax, you can avoid the taxes on selling your Bitcoin you already talked about it, by lending, using these lending platforms, using as collateral. That comes with its own risks. But like, I think in this big market dump the other day, like Liquidation didn't have any liquidation, so they're getting good at it. But you gotta remember, what's the mean? It's like 3 green dots and a red dot. That fourth year in the cycle, Bitcoin does the chart, right? And when that happens, if they stop taxing it, then you can't you can't do a tax loss harvest. You can't sell, buy it right back, and then you write off up to, I think, like $10,000 per year in perpetuity against your tax, what you owe in taxes. So it just depends on, as like Saylor says, inflation is a vector, taxes are a vector, everything's a vector. Everybody's going to have their own incentives and their own how they feel about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think you should tax people for spending some sats on things to survive, like groceries, coffee, burger, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's a big question that's needing to be answered in the coming years. I think that the Trump administration has been so open with Bitcoin and accepting of it because it's looked at as a commodity. And I think Howard Lutnick and his team have been very clear. This thing is a commodity. It's not a currency. It's just not competing with the dollar. This is its own thing. It's a store of value. It's a digital commodity. Once we get into the talk, is it a currency? Is it money? Is it a store? Like, you start adding these different layers. And of course, yeah, if it's a currency, you shouldn't spend tax to spend it, right? So it's, these are all questions that will need to be answered in the coming years. But the number one thing that you can do now is stack Bitcoin yourself. And so if you're going to do that, we highly recommend over here at Bitcoin News, you go get your Bitcoin at Rhino. Rhino are our good friends because they are building the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Of course, you can buy or sell your Bitcoin instantly. And it's got a Lightning wallet. You can send your sats anywhere on the Lightning Network instantaneously. You can withdraw to cold storage and send sats anywhere and turn them into gift cards too, right in the app. You can buy gift cards and get money back for buying them through the app. And if you got Casa for multisig, this can be one of your keys. One of the 5 keys can be your Rhino wallet. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon you'll be able to pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and stack for retirement without leaving the app. So go ahead, download Rhino today at rhinobitcoin.com, or just tap the link below in the YouTube description. Use code Bitcoin News, one word, Bitcoin News, and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin straight into your wallet today. So secure your stack with Rhino. DCA, I mean, you could, of course, you can set percentages. If you had sent a limit order on Rhino as you can, you would have stacked the dip for $102,000 of Bitcoin this Friday instead of having to go out today and buy it for $115,000. Rhino's got everything you need as a Bitcoin interface. It's an amazing wallet, great team. If you have any questions, feel free, reach out to them. They'd be more than happy to help you. All right, Rod, let's get back to the business. I mean, we've got let's talk about these markets. What do we got going on in the markets? Of course, we saw the flash crash on Friday. I mean, I'm sure you've been in Bitcoin for a while. Did you feel anything on Friday when you saw Bitcoin drop from 120,000 down to 105, 102?
When it drops from it was pretty much all-time high a week ago. And when it drops from that, maybe down to 115, it was a little, I was pumped for October. Didn't really, but when it drops that fast, that hard, it's not, I don't feel so much about worrying that the price is going down. I'm a long-term holder. To me, that kind of says something about the state of the economy or the state of world affairs. I kind of determine whether I have, right now we are flush with big announcements on social media, in the news, and some of these big announcements are all high. I always look at the Bitcoin price. If the Bitcoin price doesn't move up or down, I kind of gauge whether that announcement is worth paying attention to. But when the price just dumps so violently, it makes me start to think about the structural market conditions. So I did have a little bit of a concern there. It seems that it's probably back to this tariff tantrum, up and down. And we can talk about, is there some market manipulation going on? Is that kind of the point? But no, I don't feel scared when the price goes down, but I do maybe have more concern about what's the geopolitical situation, what's the economic situation, what is the price of Bitcoin, this volatility telling us about the rest of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin definitely is the thermometer for geopolitical tensions, massive movements behind the scenes that the rest of markets don't pick up immediately, because Bitcoin is the largest liquid market, trading 24/7, right? You're completely on track with that. When this happened on Friday, it was fun. It was sort of just we are in October. We had this 1 week ago, on the 6th, we were doing the show and we were tracking Bitcoin going over 125,000. So to have it just violently drop like that on Friday was a little interesting. But again, if you got Bitcoin in cold storage, you got nothing to worry about. It's these degenerate traders over here playing on perps, right? Perpetual futures. As I said in the intro, the meme coins got a lot of people addicted to fast money, right? And so that completely fizzled and they're looking for their new hit, and they went to perps because you can get leverage 2, 5, 10, 20, 50x leverage on these trades. But of course, I mean, if you got 50x leverage and it goes down over 2%, you're gone. You're wiped out. Your position is liquidated. So it's very risky business. And I think the reason why the market went so crazy this weekend was because a lot of people were trading these perps using other shit coins as collateral, right? So if you got a fart coin perpetual trade at 5x 10x leverage, and you're using Shiba Inu as the collateral, if Shiba Inu goes down 10%, even if fart coin stays up, you're gonna get wiped out, right? So I think that played a big part of it. And there's some funny business going on. I mean, somebody was tens of millions of dollars worth of shorts being placed up into the minute of his announcement. They're pointing at some guy who like ran an exchange over in China. He looks like a Chinese national, as the dude who was behind these giant shorts. But I mean, there's insiders, right? And who knows if what Xi and Trump are doing is all just a game, and that of course we're just the pawns.
Exactly.
Just, watching it all, and they can tell each other, hey, we're going to drop this tweet at 450.
And another thing that was interesting about the timing is, and I'm not super knowledgeable about this, so somebody can correct me, but those perps markets they don't like end every evening or whatever, but they do occasionally on like a Friday afternoon. I think they go down for like an hour or two and do whatever they're doing behind the scenes. So the market liquidity is even tighter in that short time window. So like that announcement, which created this cascading liquidation event, was purposely or not timed to be very consequential. And we talked about this on the Bugle podcast. And my main advice here is I do not recommend that you trade things like Cosmos, Polkadot, Algorand at 50x leverage during the fourth turning. This is not a winning trade to trade. Like these markets their market caps are fake. It's all leverage. It's all junk. And like you said, it's like collateral on collateral. Think about 2008. What was one of the issues? It's like collateralize this, the derivatives. It's all intertwined. And when this kind of thing happens, easy come, easy go. Do not trade 50x perps on shitcoins during a fourth turning.
No. And the beautiful thing is that when we get to a first turning, these things won't even exist anymore, right? There needs to be a fire of a fourth turning to cleanse out the market, get rid of this gambling, this financial nihilism that we are awash in these days. And very thankful for Bitcoin, because it allows you to avoid all of that, right? You don't need to waste your time trying to keep your eyes glued to a 1 second chart to try to make rent. If you can do your work, save in Bitcoin, and hold it for the long term, you're going to be financially all right. It's the desire to get rich quick that comes from the fact that our currency is being debased rapidly. The fact that your dollar buys you 75% of what it could 4 or 5 years ago, right? So it's happening faster and faster, and people are getting more and more prone to risk. They're willing to take the risk because they know that their job isn't going to give, their wages are not growing at the rate of inflation. That's really what it comes down to. So it's understandable. We live in this crazy world where fiat is debasing, and when money is broken, it really breaks a lot of other things too. So it's understandable, but that's why we're here at Bitcoin News, at the Bugle, to spread the word about Bitcoin and make people realize that there is a different way. That's what we do, man. Yes. Cool. Yeah. And so now I'd like to hop on over to we've got some other headlines like Luxembourg, Sovereign Wealth Fund, putting 1% into Bitcoin, ETFs. I mean, that's great. Europe is finally getting some Bitcoin exposure. Deutsche Bank, another story out of Europe, they say that they expect both Bitcoin and gold to appear on central bank balance sheets by 2030. That's a pretty big deal. But why? It's because of the weakening dollar and geopolitical shifts, right? So the world is getting crazier. Bitcoin is going to be on the reserves of these balance sheets for central.
Yeah, they're Yeah, you've cut out and frozen again. I don't know if you can hear me, and if your internet's cutting out. Are you still there?
Okay, now we're good. Now we're good. Sweet. So yes, Deutsche Bank. Do you think that in 5 years Bitcoin will be on the reserves of central banks? Do you agree with Deutsche Bank?
Yeah, some of these headlines in this section, it's some predictions about, due to the debasement of fiat currencies, especially the US dollar, geopolitical conditions. There's a lot of, supply chain stuff that started during COVID, where stuff's kind of being reshored, repatriated. I guess my main comment is, people who listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts per week, they have seen this coming, but these announcements are not surprising. It's central banks putting Bitcoin and gold on the balance sheet due to these mitigating circumstances. Yeah, like, we've seen this coming. I think it's coming. I think central banks probably already do have some on their balance sheet, whether that's been reported or not. El Salvador, for example. But yeah, I think it's going to increase, especially, Europe is the laggard here. They do seem to have a hard time accepting that Bitcoin has already won, and they're kind of fighting it tooth and nail. But I think even they will have to capitulate by the end of this decade.
Speaking of laggards,
that it's that you think
got
that
one right here.
it has no intrinsic value, which I personally do not agree.
When you were as a guest on College Tour 3 years ago, I asked you what you think of cryptocurrency and Bitcoins, and this is what you had to say at the time.
I actually have a son who invested in cryptos, yes. So I follow very carefully.
And what have you taken away from that?
That I would not put my finger in there. I've said all along that crypto assets are highly speculative, very risky assets. I'm concerned about, those people who assume that it's going to be a reward, who have no understanding of the risks, who will lose it all, and who will be terribly disappointed, which is why I believe that that should be regulated. My very humble assessment is that it is worth nothing. It's based on nothing. There is no underlying assets to act as an anchor of safety. If the day when we have the central bank digital currency out, any digital euro, I will guarantee. So the central bank will be behind it. And I think that's vastly different from any of those things. I could repeat exactly the same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. Exactly the same thing. Bitcoin is up over 3x since that talk 3 years ago. And Christine Lagarde says it still has no value. So there's the laggards in Europe, and Lagarde is the head of the class of the laggards.
Now, listen, nothing is easier than dunking on Christine Lagarde. But I will kind of take the other side here, just in a way. So part of the issue with, like, the broader crypto market, like all these coins, and the consequences of all this leverage gambling that we've seen, is it gives people like her cover. So when the question is asked to her about, like, how she feels about cryptos, everything she said about the crypto market and about cryptos in general, it's essentially true. If you narrow it down to Bitcoin, it's going to be a much more difficult conversation, and she's going to have a much stronger position. But when it's framed this way, and you have all this cover to dismiss it as a market generally, it's a lot more feasible politically, because he's right. You should, some of these all of these coins, with the exception of Bitcoin, are just speculative, risky, unprudent ways to invest or save your money.
Yeah, you're the voice of reason, Rod Palmer of the Bugle, and I think that's one thing that I respect about you. Actually, I heard you say this on the Walker podcast that you guys just recently did, is that because of your position, you are forced to take the side of people sometimes that you don't want to take the side of, but you have to in order to stand up against the outright pleb slop, I guess what you would say. That it's so easy to pile on to someone like a Christine Lagarde. You can say, yeah, I mean, maybe she does have some points. If you look at if you look at Cosmo that went to 0 on Friday, right? Yeah, I guess she does have some points, but that's your position, and I respect you for being able to stand up for those who don't have a voice within this community.
Yeah, it's. I don't want to defend Christine Lagarde. That's the last thing I want to do. But when the conversation is framed the way it is, it's dunking on her and ratioing her on social media. It's not very convincing. It's not very effective or productive, because the average person looks at the broader crypto market and agrees with everything she says. So narrowing the scope and being more thoughtful and deliberate instead of just regurgitating pleb slop in your arguments all the time it'll be much more productive if you are very careful in how you approach the critique of some of these political leaders and central banks and force them to give you a good, well thought out response.
Yeah, but nuance doesn't pay you those Twitter bucks, dude. What are you talking about? That doesn't play, bro.
That's the problem. The algorithm is harder if you have principles.
Yeah, and not just principles, but nuance. I think that's the hardest thing on social media, and I do think there is a place for rallying the team, right, and being rah at times because I mean we do have to deal with a bunch of crap of people just talking about saying Bitcoin is a scam and all this stuff, and we need to stand strong and maintain our course. And sometimes it does feel good to dunk on dinosaurs like Lagarde. But also Bitcoin is maturing and we are entering into different conversations here. And so you got to be able to play that game too, because the have fun staying poor chains can only get you so far in the great narrative debate of 2025.
Absolutely. It is, save it for the people who need it. Save the energy and the fire and the gumption for the people who are still trying to say that Bitcoin mining boils the oceans. Like, dunk on them all day long.
Yeah. Well, the last story that we'll touch upon is the fact that this year's Nobel Prize winner is a Bitcoiner. It was rewarded to the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, for advancing democracy. She is a vocal Bitcoiner, and she calls Bitcoin a humanitarian tool and a vital means of resistance. So this, I mean, I know Frank Corva, as we've talked about multiple times on this broadcast, he was saying that he wants to highlight these stories more, right? Alex Gladstein, of course, writes about this often. Bitcoin is a tool for human rights and for resistance fighters. I mean, like, we're not talking about Star Wars Luke Skywalker. We're talking about people who are completely blacklisted by the state and have no means of transacting without something that is censorship resistant like Bitcoin. So it does have real world value in more than just number go up, store of value, but also allowing these actual real world people who are standing up for something in order to survive in some very difficult situations.
And absolutely. And from my perspective, I love stacking credentials, having, PhDs, having Ray Dalio, podcasters, having presidents, having all these people who are advocates of Bitcoin. Now we have a Nobel Peace Prize winner. That's a very impressive credential to draw, at Thanksgiving or at dinner, a conversation, when you're trying to orange pill your family members. You can bring up that the Nobel Peace Prize winner this year is a Bitcoiner. and people love credentials. This is a great win for all of us.
It is, and it also helps the fact that, I mean, some people are saying that Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize for his work over in Gaza over the last couple of weeks. But I think it helps our cause as propagandists, the fact that it is the Nobel Peace Prize winner is a Bitcoiner is not Trump, because that would have just muddied the waters.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It depends on. Yeah, Thanksgiving would be a lot harder with the liberal in-laws trying to be like, well, the Nobel Peace, well, they're not going to respect the Nobel Peace Prize anymore if you got it.
Exactly. Well, Rod, we are coming up on our hour right now. I really appreciate you coming on. We had to battle through some technical difficulties, but I'm very glad that we kept the course and did this show. Great going back and forth with you. Instant rapport between the Bugle and Bitcoin News, both allies in the great fight for spreading the gospel of Bitcoin, orange pilling the world, and making sure the Square terminals in your neighborhood are accepting Bitcoin and becoming economic nodes. So, Rod, final thoughts, final words. Where should people find you and learn more about the Bugle?
You can check me out at Rod Palmer Hodl on X. You can look up Bugle Weekly is our podcast. We are going to absolutely reach out and get you on for our interview behind the podcast series. Love Bitcoin News. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to a big rest of the month of October. Don't trade on leverage, just hodl and cold storage. You can ride out the volatility and survive the fourth turning.
Just survive. Hold on to your butts, ladies and gentlemen. It's only going to get weirder, and you've got the Bugle and Bitcoin News to help you through it. Until next week, thank you so much for